Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Level Up Cleveland. And this week we have a legend in the house. We do.
Okay.
We have Mr. Alan Greene with us. We're very happy to have him in here with us. It's another one of those moments where we have somebody in here that we're like just a little more excited about because, you know, you represent the city's like this is the thing I really love is that, you know, I think people honestly just don't realize some of the people we actually have in our city and the level of talent that we actually have in our city, some of the accomplishments that some of the people from Cleveland have done. And I just went and saw you last week play, and every accolade you've ever been given and everything that's ever been said about you is true and worthy. You are phenomenal. Your band is phenomenal. I mean, you're extremely entertaining band to watch.
Well, thank you.
For various reasons. And we're going to get into all those things I was just stating. But most cool is recently you just got inducted into the Cleveland Blues Society Hall of Fame.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's pretty much got to be the pinnacle of as far as the accolade type thing goes.
It's very nice and very flattering, you know.
Yeah.
Anything you get like that. I think I was talking to you earlier. I know I was talking to you earlier, but if you kind of stick it out your whole life and you're playing with a dedication and, you know, you get older and you keep on doing it, people say, oh, we better give him some kind of a thumbs up here because he's not going to be around that much.
Oh, I don't know if that's what it is. I just know that, well, you've done well to, you know, get this ability that you have out there throughout your whole life. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff with a lot of different bands.
I've been lucky.
Well, you know, maybe some luck, but a lot of it's the ability part. And I do want to get into that. Like, I like to talk to the guys and find out what separates you guys. Like, how is it that, you know, what makes you, what's the drive in you? Because everybody knows guitar does it. You don't become great at guitar unless you work at it. And that's the only way. And so the difference between guitar players is obviously work ethic, really. I mean, like, you know,
Right.
the reason one guy can be this good and what drives you to get to that point. And we'll get to that. But first of all, thanks for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man, this is really exciting. Where were you from originally?
I grew up in Shaker Heights, kind of down on the lower, older end, not in some vast mansion, you know, but I went to school with a lot of, you know, well-off kids. Their parents were well-off and kind of got acclimated to a certain mindset. It was, you know, met some cool people and just went from there. I don't know.
And when did you pick up a guitar?
When I was 17 years old, I picked up a guitar. Now, when I was 17 or 16, coincided with when the Beatles
Beatles
appeared
started,
on
right.
Ed Sullivan show.
I got
Because
you.
I'm older, and that age group, and like so many of my friends, and later on my peers, whatever, I want to do that. That's what I want. I want to be a Beatle.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You always hear that story. I've heard it a bazillion times.
Anybody anywhere near my age bracket, I bet 90% of the people were the same way. A lot of my best friends in the business, musician friends, personal friends, started for the same reason.
Yeah.
It was such a earthquake, a seismic change, you know, culturally. And of course, we were young. You're still in school, so you're very impressionable. And you just, I had grown up during my school era playing trumpet, taking trumpet lessons, and playing in all the school bands and orchestras. And
So you did have musical training, and you were.
well, yeah, I had you know, in fourth grade, if I remember, I'm going back to the early 1700s. They gave us at least. I don't think they still do this anymore, but how would I know? They gave us a musical aptitude test in fourth grade. I think we're 10 years old. And then if you scored well, which I did, and they encourage you and your parents to
get an instrument.
rent an instrument. And so I ended up choosing trumpet because I thought the buttons were cool. You know, I was a kid, and buttons are really cool when you're
Sure.
So later I learned they were called valves and not buttons. But anyway,
Look like buttons.
so you know, every Friday I would walk home and take a lesson from a guy in the Cleveland Orchestra, actually a trombonist in the Cleveland Orchestra, and taught trumpet and whatnot. And I just was really into it at the time, and that kind of morphed into the high school and the Beatles invasion and the whole British invasion and the guitar. Guitar bands were it was a new thing. If you weren't there, you can't really appreciate what an incredible, shift in the world, because not only musically, but I mean, almost like in terms of the culture, fashion, hair. I mean, everything was kind of changing then, and they kind of fed that, this whole mod thing and the, England and the Carnaby Street and the fashions and everybody, all these business people were growing their hair longer, over the ears and trying to be cool and combing it down instead of back,
Yeah, right. Everyone was just a little different, doing the opposite.
So it was a pretty exciting time, but it was the only time we knew we were just kids, like I said, or high schoolers by then. And it's just, I want to do that. And so I just switched over to guitar, and like everybody else wanted to do, and pick a cheap guitar. And my buddy, who was also in the band with me, he picked up a guitar, and we used to sit around, and he would play. He had an inclination to play like little rhythm, try to cop rhythm parts. We were kind of elementary in our attempts, mind you. Mm-hmm. But I had this inclination to pick out melody lines and leads, We didn't even know what leads were at the time. Well, we did because, George Harrison was a lead guitar player.
Right.
Back then there was rhythm guitar player and lead guitar
player. And like Chuck Berry was around too, stuff like that. So
sure.
Yeah, right. You knew what lead guitar was from that, but it was different.
Yeah, but they didn't even you didn't even hear the term lead guitar.
Yeah, right. It didn't have
really
a name.
Until the British invasion of the Beatles.
Really?
George was a lead guitarist. You didn't know what a lead guitar was.
Chuck
Berry, and all them guys. Yeah,
guitar player.
They played guitar player, so.
I get
but
you.
There was defined roles back then.
I get you. They were starting to put labels on what kind of a guitar player. Was he lead? Was he rhythm?
Yeah.
And rock and roll was kind of creating this kind of thing, wasn't it? Right? That's what it was, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did you ever, before the Beatles thing, did you ever, like we were just talking about Chuck Berry and them, did you have an inclination that you were interested in a guitar, or was it ever something that you always kind of thought back and forth, and then the Beatles was like, that's it, I'm doing it? Or did it just that everything came out at that point, basically?
Everything guitar related came out at that point.
So Harrison, was he
Yeah, he was my first
the one that,
hero, I suppose.
Yeah.
I love the Beatles to this day.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
So then, at some point, though, it went from rock and you started getting more into the blues type thing, which rock and blues really go hand in hand. But
absolutely. But
you also took it to where you're heavy more on the blues, and it's more of a rock that you put in, because what you're playing on guitar, especially your some of your leads, is just incredible type blues stuff. That's and you're pulling the tricks out, you're doing all the little stuff that just. It was just very entertaining to watch and listen to, man. You guys are great. You're great.
Make me feel like it's a good thing I got.
I was so glad I went. That's all I can tell you. I was like, wow, man, it's just mind bending. And so at some point you went that way. So it went from Harrison. What happened? How do you feel like your influences took you into that direction more?
Okay, well, after post early Beatles, I mean, and the rest of the British invasion, then you moved up into 67, 1968, and you had your Eric Claptons and Cream, and you had your Led Zeppelin starting to happen, and Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds happening, and you had the Hendrix, the fearsome foursome,
right?
Page, Hendrix, Beck, and Clapton,
I like that.
They were the four, and have always really been, that everybody else kind of sort of molded themselves.
Everything kind of went from that.
Well, yeah, because they were just taking it to a different level. Because previous to that, the guitar was, listen to early '60s stuff, and it was kind of clean and horny and stuff. Compared to when the British guys, not kind of Hendrix was American, but
he hung out with them dudes.
He became famous by going to England, and that just kind of took it to a whole different dimension. I can remember, in fact, exactly where I was. You know how there's these historic events in your life and you know where you were?
100%.
Well, musically, I could tell you exactly where I was the first time I heard the first Zeppelin album, the first time I heard the first Santana album, the first time I heard, saw the Beatles, of course. But uh, it just became a cool thing. And then I learned later on that they were trying to emulate their heroes, the American blues guys.
The Delta guys, they're from.
But I didn't know anything about it back then. I thought they were just the first guys to ever do those kind of things.
I think everybody did, really.
Yeah, they were just taking what was done by the early blues guys and reinterpreting it with their Marshall amps and stuff, and rock and roll, and it was really really powerful. You know, I can remember I started saying, driving. I was driving on the Shoreway to a gig with this early band that I was in, and Sunshine of Your Love came on the radio. I'd never heard it before. It was a new thing. And our drummer, who, by the way, at that point was Dan Klawan, who wrote It's Cold Outside the Choir, you know, Dan.
Oh,
Klawan,
yeah.
Guy. I did a short gig that he was in, and actually Wally Bryson was in it too, it's really under the radar. Nobody knew. We were just, you know, I'm not worthy, you know. Those guys were heroes of mine because the Mods and back in a band called the Mods on the east side of Cleveland was kind of the coolest band.
Really, at the time?
Yeah, they were really happening. So anyway, we were driving to this gig downtown and on the Shoreway, and he said, "Oh, listen to this. Check this out." Dan Klawan. Sunshine of Your Love, and I never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, I can specifically remember
it
made a kind of an impression because it didn't sound like anything else, you know.
At that time, yeah. We're nabowadays everybody's so used to like Sunshine. It's like it's a riff again. But
you can't do anything today, and people aren't like, well, blasé.
You know.
But it was new then. You see, it's hard to overemphasize how new things were. I mean. You can't, if you're a certain age, if you're not a certain age yet, you can't even imagine the
impact. It was different. It was because there, you know, like rock has changed throughout the years, but it's still been rock, and it still basically has the same kind of elements. All the elements changed. Like drums changed. The whole formula changed. I mean, now you had the bass, the guitar, the drums. You had the power trio with the front guy or whatever,
right.
And that became a staple. And that that didn't happen before.
Right.
Now this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And
yeah, when something is new,
it's just
for the first time, you know, in anything in life, it makes an impact. You know, I mean, if you eat steak the first time in your life, you've never had it. You've been on a desert island all of your life. You're stranded, and you've been eating seaweed and stuff, and then somebody gives you a fillet or something.
Yeah,
you know.
You're losing your mind.
But then you eat a fillet or something every day for the next 10 years.
Then that's
not going to be so special much anymore. So that's kind of like kind of how music can be.
Yeah,
but with that first time when things are new like that.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing like it.
Well, and it was exciting.
And keep in mind too, I was of the age where it was. Impressionable. There were formative musical years.
Sure.
Okay. So my formative musical years just happened to coincide with the greatest time in rock music.
I see what you're saying, for sure.
And I was lucky that way.
It's a chance thing. You know, like, right. You know, like you were just happened to be born at the right time where you were still young enough to pick up the guitar and be really good at it. And you were still, all that was happening. It all happened at the same time. Plus, let's be honest. I mean, like you're 17 when you pick up the guitar and all that stuff happens. And this new rock and roll, it's loaded with energy. It's loaded with power and this never happened before.
And there was an underground scene, you know, that whole thing. People don't, what does that mean? But there was this really cool underground scene.
Now, in Cleveland,
all that stuff was considered underground.
Now, what was now what's going on in Cleveland during all this now? This is like so you pick up the guitar, you're 17 years old. Was there any local bands or anyone that you at that point yet that you were like kind of like paying attention to? You said
I mentioned Dan Klawan being in the Mods.
The Mods.
Who later became the Choir.
Okay, that's right.
I'll say now you knew them by that name, the Choir.
Yes.
But they originally were called the Mods.
Yes.
And they were, at that point in time, bands weren't so, prevalent and saturated everywhere. Now, I mean, there's a band or jam anywhere you go, any moment. There's a band.
Yeah, you're right.
But then, again, going back to the new is exciting thing, it was all young and new, at that point. And going to see the choir or the mods at the Chagrin Armory in Chagrin Falls. There's a big old, they had some concerts, and it was a big,
like a venue.
it was a gigantic building with a concrete floor and
gymnasium almost like.
Yeah, but it was anyway. So
I gotcha.
So they were the biggest band. They were the band on the east side. On the west side of Cleveland, a band called the Tree Stumps, I'd say. The Tree Stumps, which contained Michael Stanley, by the way, before he was solo and became successful. And there were literally, those two bands seemed to dominate the east and the west side. There wasn't like a million different bands, and you didn't know who was who you didn't care who was who, right, or where from where or another. But then, again, not to belabor the point, but it was more defined. There was more a rarity about it. You're still growing up. It was a new thing, and you were growing with it and influenced by it. So I would have to say the choir on the east side, the Tree Stumps on the west side, and then everybody else, I suppose.
Yeah, right. And then later on, you had like bands like the Raspberries that came in.
I was going to say, before they were the Raspberries, they were called. Well, no, it was a different band lineup, but Eric Carmen's the Cyrus Erie was the name of the band. And then there was a club that Don Ladani managed them, and had a club called the Cyrus Erie West, and they had these teen clubs, these big clubs, big stages and big venues, and that was kind of cool. The Hullabaloo clubs.
Oh yeah,
there was a Hullabaloo in Chesterland. There was one in Mentor. And they had some big acts playing there besides local acts, like the one in Mentor. Jeff Beck played there.
Oh really?
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, right.
And we're just, there you go. You don't have to be old enough or have an age requirement because of alcohol, because they didn't serve alcohol. It was like teen clubs, which is bizarre.
Now
but it's cool.
So you're learning how to play guitar at 17, and you're basically learning how. Are you taking lessons? Are you just playing tunes and learning, just copying people and that kind of thing, learning that kind of thing at first?
Yeah, even though I took my trumpet lessons all those years, I never took a guitar lesson. I just was self-taught, and probably ended up doing things wrong to this day, because our teacher would have said, "No, don't do it like that. You're doing it wrong." But
right.
That's, whatever is right to you. Later on, I found out that, and I didn't know it for years and years later, but looking back, having a work ethic as a musician, and having a pride about doing what you're doing and wanting to be really good, and having the aptitude, the ability, talent, whatever you want to call it, to make you stand out because you're good, as opposed to blend in with everything else. I was never content with that blend in thing. I mean, I don't mean standing out on stage and showing off. I mean, in musical terms, just being part of something, being an ensemble, but being really good at what you did. I always had a real strong sense of being the best that I could be, and not wanting to feel embarrassed. You know what I mean? Being proud. So if I had a bad night, I was playing somewhere, I would bum out for, I'd get bummed out for a week and a half, 2 weeks, oh God. And then little by little, I learned that you outgrow that and you just let it go. Tomorrow's another gig.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. And because it's inevitable. I don't care who you are. It's going to be ups and downs, good, bad, slumps, peaks, all that stuff.
Sure.
But being, having always been prodded by my bandmates, early bandmates and things, and friends, oh, you're really, you're really good. Yeah, you're the best guy in the band, or whatever. We're just like nobodies, okay?
Yeah.
But we tried our best. But I always got a lot of praise from my friends and encouragement, and that just kept feeding me to believe in my own desires to be good.
Yeah, right.
Or the best I could.
Yeah, you could
Or
follow.
like, I wanted to be able to be as, I'm never going to be like that. Or I heard, like we were talking about earlier, the Cream or something,
Yeah.
Like, oh, Sunshine of Your Life. I'm never going to sound like that. What's the use? I'm going to just put down my guitar and never play again. But that took care, that sounds pretentious. That kind of resolves itself after a while because you find yourself in better company as you keep playing. If your standards are fairly high and you're doing it like that's your life. You're not just kind of doing it just as a hobby.
Yeah,
you're doing
going
it
through
as a
the
life
motions.
thing.
Yeah.
It's that important to you. You find yourself like when that band breaks up, somebody else, let's do this. And you find yourself with somebody else who's got that same desire. And that feeds itself. And over a period of time, you get in better and better company who think like you do. And you always have to keep that standard up. So like if you get an opportunity to be in a band that's that's a real good band. I'll never get in something like that. But you find yourself in something like that, you keep growing is my point.
Yeah, right.
The more
Well, I think you hit on a whole bunch of stuff just there, but one of them for sure is that I think that there's a lot of people out there who, I tried to figure out all the time what separates the great ones from the mediocre one and a lot of it can just be pure talent, and that's part of what it is. But there's also, like I said, there's also a drive in some people that doesn't exist in everybody, and what is that?
Well, it's something I've always believed it's either something you have or you don't have. Now, there's no criticism about people who don't have that. There's no criticism about somebody who not looking to have their life center around music or your abilities as a musician.
Right.
There's no criticism. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. Play on weekends once in a while. Have a good time.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. That's why some people aren't really striving to go take it anywhere, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then there's the element of there's certain people who have that. It's more than that. This is all I know how to do. This is all I want to do. Yeah. And there's a certain inherent thing that you either have, I think, or you don't have.
Yeah, because you've been in a number of bands. You got into the Humble Pie for a little while there. You were
the reformed version of the band,
but
not
still
the original.
No, but still, it's still pretty badass. And then Breathless, you were a member of Breathless. Yeah. You mentioned we were just talking off camera about The Innocent.
Yeah,
that you were a part of. That was Trent Reznor.
He was in
the band with you.
It wasn't his band per se.
No, but I mean,
he was a keyboard player.
Yeah, but you were in the band with him, and that was kind of neat. And people don't realize that he was kind of a local dude there.
Right.
And another one that I really think that I'm familiar with from back, I remember is Mr. Stress.
Oh yeah,
the Mr. Stress band,
Mr. Stress.
Which was a blues band basically, right? I mean, that was like basically what they did, and right up your alley, I guess, right?
The Mr. Stress Blues Band was the title.
Yeah, and when you're playing the blues, what are you playing, like B.B. King and stuff like that, or what are you playing your own stuff, or what was
then?
Yeah.
Oh well, Stress was Bill Miller, Mr. Stress. He passed away about 5-6 years ago. He was one of the earlier guys in town, going back to the '60s, doing blues like white guys doing blues, I suppose.
Right.
I guess.
Right.
To be fair about it. But no, he was like a big disciple of the Chicago blues, Paul Butterfield kind of sounding, James Cotton harmonica tone, so he would do what you mentioned, some obscure blues tunes, some less obscure blues tunes, but he had his own sound and his own approach.
Did you early on in guitar playing? Your heroes right off the bat are, you said, like the Harrisons, and you have the Big Four.
The Big Four.
And heavily blues. That's what they're doing. I mean, they're the ones that are really putting the blues into the rock and roll.
They're interpreting it their way.
So what I'm going to ask you though is, and they're interpreting it from like Howlin' Wolf and all these old Delta blues guys that were doing it first.
Right. Rolling Stones.
Well, I mean,
Muddy
like they're
Waters,
and I think the funny thing about the blues is, I'm sure a lot of people realize this, but is that there's not a lot of new blues that is remade. Most blues is just old blues riffs and songs and rhythms that are just used again and again.
Until Stevie Ray Vaughan comes along, which is few and far between, but he certainly
he changed things up a little.
He woke it up.
That's the guy who did that. But I'm just saying, though, at that time, though, back especially then, though, like you're not, like, that's one thing about the blues is, like, I mean, look at Led Zeppelin, right? I mean, like, how many Led Zeppelin songs are actually, their version of a blues song?
Willie
Really?
Dixon, who, famously, if you're kind of on the inside looking in, looking further in at least, they failed to give him credit. Half of the things, the ideas, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of the ideas came from songs that either maybe he wrote or Muddy Waters wrote, and they took a lick in there, a lick here, a lick there, and it became a Zeppelin tune, and they rocked it out and kind of added a few things. Excuse me. And that later on, in fact, they got sued or something by Willie Dixon, and he finally got credit later on in subsequent recording or releases. Pressings is what I'm trying to say. Because it was like you listen to some of these things, and there's no question where it came from.
Sure.
So I mean, you always borrow from your inspirations. Borrow is a nice way for steal.
Yeah,
stealing is malicious sounding, but it's not really. It's just I steal from the best,
Yeah, right.
Influenced by. So all these kind of things, they repeat, and then there's a new chemistry of people reinterpret it, and it changes a little, but it's there. It's the core of it is all there.
Did you go back and look into those guys from the Delta Blues guys? Did you ever go back and try to like find out where your heroes?
Yeah, well, I have heard. I haven't deliberately done that, but over the years, I'm a little more passive about the old original blues Delta day.
You're more an electric guitar blues.
Yeah,
type.
I'll be to be honest. I'm not trying to fool anybody. I'm kind of a mishmash, kind of musical schizophrenia about being a rock player or a blues player. But blues is always at the root of my thing, and then I got to return more to it. But
so it was the electric guitar that got you into it. And
I got a little bored with the original stuff. But for a short period of time, I was hosting a blues show on Oh Wow Radio, which was an online radio station, and I got to listen to a lot of the old stuff. That a lot of which I had, of course, heard before, and some of the ones I didn't. And I went, wow, isn't that interesting? Sometimes it's cool if you don't know a song's original format or arrangement, and you're given the song kind of, and it's sort of by somebody else.
Yeah,
it's all different, and you end up playing it not like the original thing, but reminiscent to a point, but not. Certainly not trying to copy the old thing with old stomping and sitting on the front porch kind of with the acoustic guitar or whatever.
Yeah, that's what it was. I mean,
so you interpret things differently, and you don't hear them originally done. You don't know how they were supposed to go. And I think in a blues kind of group, that's helpful because you're not going to mimic what are you going to do? You're going to try to be somebody from 1930? Oh, I'm an old black guy in Georgia, Mississippi. No, you're a white suburban kid, who plays electric guitar through a Marshall amp or something.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest about it. Yeah, I'm not trying to.
You can actually, and it's a true story because you can actually, if you hear some of those recordings from back in them days with those guys, you can hear things through those recordings that's coming through that music that's not just typical.
Oh, no.
It was a very different time, and those guys were living very different lives, and it's in the music. It's in the name of the music, the blues, for Christ's sake, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're right. But I have listened to a lot of that, and it's amazing how good those guys actually were. I can see why the British guys, their minds were blown. They were like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And it's great that it all happened, though.
They idolized all. That's what they, where did the Rolling Stones get there?
Yeah.
I mean, and they never hit it.
Oh, no.
No. They gave nothing but accolades and to the originators.
Oh yeah, man.
They should.
And they were doing blues rock versions of blues songs for a lot of the Stones. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
Man.
They did it the way they thought it could be done or knew how to do it.
So let me ask you this. So you're learning how to play guitar.
Still.
You got to get a band together eventually here, right? You're at what point are you? I mean, did you take lessons?
No.
You never took guitar lessons.
No, self-taught.
And when you say self-taught, that just means
by ear.
Yeah, because we didn't have YouTube, and we didn't have things like that kids have available to them today, where like scales and that kind of thing that you got to have to know to learn how to play guitar. How do you learn scales and how do you learn stuff like that?
I never was one to learn scales. I can't tell you what scale is what. When I hear people, going off, oh, this is in the so-and-so mixolydian or some scale or this or that or D minor flatted, it's like, I don't even listen. I don't even hear it because I don't understand it.
So music theory itself isn't something that
I'm bored
needed.
With music theory. It's very good if a person wants to do, let's say, recording studio session work or movie soundtracks or get hired as a band performer at a theatrical event, a pit player in Playhouse Square for some Broadway show that's in touring. The musicians union will get people to fill those spots and be in those bands. Well, you have to be able to read. You have to be able to have that professional understanding. As a professional studio guy, you go to either the coasts and all these major guys are playing on all these different records. They get it. They read. They have the charts. They know it. They know the theory. They know everything. They get it down. Bang bang. I'm real slow in the studio. I go in there and I'm just my concentration is horrible, and it takes me unless I'm lucky, it could be quick, but unless I'm lucky, it might take me 25 takes to get something that I'm content with,
Oh yeah, I mean but that's
so I don't have that kind of discipline, but I don't think it really matters because I think people are either have an ear for music. You play by ear is what I've always done. I could hear something and I could kind of.
The notes are.
I know what sounds right and I know what sounds wrong, and I'm sure everybody knows what sounds right and wrong. Right. And so I try to spend more time with the right notes than the wrong notes.
Right.
But and that's subject to catastrophe at any given moment. But a bad night.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that, though. A bad night for some people, though, is basically sometimes all locked up in their own head, and nobody else really
that's
saw,
the truth. Yeah.
Nobody else really saw the same night
that's
that they experienced.
Interestingly, you could think you had a great night. You're playing and you're feeling like you're on another planet. It's everything it should be. Everything's connected. And you think when you get done, you're going to be...
People are going to be like, that's the greatest night I ever saw you do.
No, but then nobody even makes note of it. And it's like, okay. And then you think it was great and nobody cares. And other nights, really feeling lost and not together at all, not in sync, not on your game. And then everybody, my God, I never heard you sound so good.
That's the way it is.
I'm not kidding.
It does work that way.
And I have a feeling everybody's like that too.
I do too. I think it's funny that when you think about especially when you first start playing music, we were just talking about this with our band, and you're going out there, the nerves, the thoughts that go through your head. Oh, I'm going to do this wrong. I'm going to do that wrong. And even if you did it wrong, not one person in the audience will comment on it. They never know. Right. None of that stuff ever blows up in your
Miles
face.
Davis said the only thing that defines a wrong note is the note that follows it.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty profound.
It really is.
Yeah, make a mistake, make it sound like you meant it, but I don't know.
So at what point did you want to be the Beatles? I mean, you said you see the Beatles on that's all, and you're like, I want to do that. Now you've learned guitar. Now you got to get some guys together. And what's interesting about that time, I imagine also, is that, the Beatles just came out recently, so everybody isn't available out there playing the same kind of music. You got to find these guys. Like there's probably, it's not like today where 7,000 people play rock guitar and you can. There's only a few of you guys. Am I right?
Early,
when you're just after you just learn guitar, you got to form a band.
I didn't form any bands. I formed my own band. I formed my own band, which exists today, but that wasn't until 1998.
So you joined a band.
I was a member of bands. I either joined a bands happened to be a founding member of some young band that with my buddies who happened to be musicians.
I got you.
Circumstantial, a lot of it. And I was never really the instigator. The first band I was ever in when I was a teen, I was sitting in a music store, Googling at the guitars on the walls, and sitting there playing, who knows? This is primitive stuff, Louis, something from the mid-'60s, really primitive. That's all we knew. And some kid comes over, and he's fast. He's listening to me, introduces himself. He's a drummer, and he was kind of a hyper guy like me, and he kind of led me into this thing, and we got a band together, but I didn't have anything to do with it. And I've always been that way. Either joined somebody else's band or became a part of somebody else's band. I never was the motivator, the starter. It only came many, many years later, like I said, when I started my own group with the help of my drummer at the time. Let's do this. We jammed, and we had a good time. With a couple of friends, and listen, it sounds good. We ought to do this, and we did. And of course, my band has changed configurations a few times since then.
Yeah,
but originally, so I really never.
But what was the first thing you got into? What was the first band you entered?
Me?
Yeah,
the band was called the Gang Green.
Oh, I like it.
But it wasn't. It had nothing to do with my name. It just was the Gang Green, like our motto on our business cards.
Oh, I get you. It wasn't. I see what you said. You just happened to be Alan Greene in Gang Green.
Yeah,
that's basically
it had nothing to do with my name.
But, so what was that like? What was
the motto of that band? By the way, was for the spread of infectious music.
I like it.
Yeah,
that's clever.
And we had business cards.
You guys sound like you're ahead of your time there.
A green felt on the business card.
Wow.
Because a couple of the guys in the band were thinkers,
Yeah, man.
Doing it.
That's ahead of your time a little bit. Sounds like there was some of that stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
And what was that doing? Were you guys playing rock? Are you
then?
Playing? Yeah.
Oh my God, rock then. Keep in mind where the time frame, the era. Well, I mentioned Louis.
Yeah.
That was new on the radio.
Yeah.
A Little Black Egg. Paul Revere and the Raiders. We're talking about simple stuff. Hang on, Sloopy.
Yeah, right.
Essential, simple stuff.
Yeah.
But that was all you had to be able to do because what came later hadn't happened yet.
Right.
So
it was coming though.
Well, so you had to play that. Well, you tried at least. You didn't have to. There was nothing riding on it, but you wanted to. So then
there's an evolution in music that comes and stuff, and everything changes. What was that like at that point? I mean, like now, are you having to like relearn things as far as like how you're playing, or is there's a whole nother level of musicianship that takes place here, and you're in the middle of all this learning while this happens, right?
Well, it's just like anything that you're growing with. You're growing. You're not if you're 20, you're not 15 anymore.
Yeah.
You've learned 5 more years of life.
Yeah, right.
Even though you don't realize it at the time. And then when you're 30, you're not 20. Or when you're 50, you're not 25 anymore.
Right.
And you still feel like you don't know what you're doing, but you got 25 years more experiences in your life, and you learn.
Yeah, right.
It's any learning experience.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like you said, it's like it was seismic at that time, though, and this was like a big change. You went from Louis to from and all of a sudden,
But everybody did.
Yeah.
Not just me. I mean, I was just riding the wave of life. I'm doing like everybody does.
Right.
Everything's going to change. I want to keep doing this, and like I said earlier, you're listening to the Beatles, my heroes, and then the Jimi Hendrix comes out, or the Cream, or the Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
That comes out.
Another level.
So it's another level, but you learn that. Or you try to learn that. How did he get that guitar to distort like that?
Yeah, right.
See, that's another thing. In my early days, their guitar was clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was no distortion.
And then when they introduced the fuzz tone guitar pedal, which are like Satisfaction, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And of course I had one. That was the first distortion thing, and then The first time I remember this so well. Glenn Schwartz is a local. Now there's a hero for you.
Sure.
He passed away, sadly. He influenced a lot of really some of my favorite local people. He came back from California after he left Pacific Gas and Electric out in California and came back to Cleveland and played at Deepu's Tool and Die Works in the Flats on Columbus Road, the original Deepu's. And he had him and his brother Gene and a drummer. I can't exactly recall who was the drummer. And Glenn was the end-all blues Cleveland guy. He was the original guitar player in the James Gang, preceded Joe Walsh. And he knew all these tricks, how to overdrive an amplifier, get that sound, that distorted sound that you're hearing on a Cream album or, you know what I mean,
right.
Jeff Beck.
That you guys couldn't all figure out.
We didn't know quite how we were trying to figure it out. Didn't know how to do it. Some people would cut their speakers with a razor blade. I never did that, but just to get a distortion. And Glenn knew how to overdrive it with a preamp and how to do that and hook it up. And I saw him. He had this little small amp, and he had this little thing with tubes sticking up on the. And he knew how to do it. He had that sustain and that. He was a master of the vibrato and the blues thing, and he was light years ahead.
Yeah, he's great. I mean,
light years ahead of us, and that's how you learn. That's how you learn. And then maybe your more educated buddy who has an electronics ilk. Is that the right word? Has a tendency, ilk.
Yeah, I think that is the right word, though. I think that's what it means.
Good word, though.
Yeah.
Helped you. We'll figure that out. And he wires this, and you get if you don't blow up an amp, then you learn how it,
Yeah.
It's a learning thing.
Well, because when Butch was in here, he told us the Glenn Schwartz story also.
Oh, well, he was probably one of the great disciples of Glenn.
Yeah, he loved him and all that.
Oh.
But what he said was exactly what you just said, actually, almost verbatim, that everybody was searching for these techniques and these tricks and these sounds and how are they doing all this? And then Glenn comes back and he's like, here's how you do it. And I was thinking to myself, like, Glenn was at your guys' YouTube. Yeah. Right? He was like YouTube for you guys. Like you as long as you went and saw Glenn, you were like, oh, and then you could go back.
Wow, that's simplifying it quite a bit.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how he does. Oh, I'm going to do
you couldn't just go do it.
No,
yeah,
you had to do it just like that.
Yeah, right. No problem.
He was on a different planet. And he was a showman to boot.
Did he influence you? Would you say like to keep getting better when you see a guy like that and you're like, son of a bitch? Like,
yeah. I mean, intimidated actually.
Yeah.
I was always intimidated by a lot of people, and it's like, what's the use? I'll never do that.
Yeah. So you did go down that path.
I'm never gonna play again. Bumps me out. I was always that way.
And then you'd work at it, and then eventually you'd get
there. I mean, the drive to play was too strong to not play. But
so let's get into the bands. We got to get into the bands. This is too much fun to talk to. I think we could do this for like 4 hours, but we can't. So you were a member of Breathless?
Yes, sir.
When did that happen?
1978 to 1981, I believe, the beginning of 81 or New Year's. I joined. Jonah Coslin was the leader of Breathless, the force, the writer. He had an incarnation of Breathless before they became as well known, and he made a few changes. He wanted to. He was the only guitarist in the band at that time. He'd left Michael Stanley to form Breathless. It was kind of at a high point of their relationship, but he had the urge to do his own thing because he was a pretty. Jonah is always a very prolific writer. Writes in all kinds of styles and had a good thing going. And he wanted to share the guitar duties. He was the only guitarist in the band at that time, and he wanted to be more the front guy. So he's looking for a guitar player, and I got. Long story short, I got into the band, and so he could like not play while I'm holding down the guitar or whatever, so he could concentrate more on the crowd or whatever,
the vocal part or whatever.
And right? So yeah, and then so when that was about early 79 or late 78, early 79, and after I got in the band, and Mark Avsek, keyboard player, who later went on with Donnie Iris and so forth, and another million stories there for you. We got Well, the band was managed by Mike Belkin was our manager.
Oh.
Belkin Productions were still around. They weren't merged with Live Nation as they are today. But Mike Belkin managed us. He managed Michael Stanley. He managed a couple of him. Carl Maduri. Well, I don't want to get too convoluted here. So we got a record deal on EMI Records, EMI America specifically, which was no small matter. It was a major label. And the music business at that time was very different, too. It's not like today, and everybody has records out, and everybody has their own labels and this and that, or little regional labels. But EMI was a worldwide Capitol Records, EMI Capitol, United Artists, were all owned by. So, in fact, the Beatles were on EMI.
Yeah.
Need I say more? So we got a record deal, and it was we did 2 albums. And during the first one was in 1979, recorded at Criteria Studios in Miami, where all the mega platinum stuff was done. And the second one we did out in L.A. at Sound City.
Oh, really?
And it was great. So that was 1979, and then by the end of 1980, the last gig was right at the end of 1980, and Jonah wanted he was feeling put upon by the record company, wanting more poppy hits. Like the first album was very well accepted. Really well accepted. We were like locally kings of the road, other than Michael Stanley himself. We were getting all kinds of favorable things, and we experienced as we were toured with major acts and this and that. So I think he just, between management and record labels, kind of prodding him to kind of go take a direction that he felt rebellious, and started rebelling. And the second album was a lot less poppy and bright than the first one. It was a darker, more serious sounding, and great record. Don't get me wrong, phenomenal rock and roll album, and but different. And so it started to kind of dissolve, and he just wanted to go on. I think every 3 years he gets an itch and wants to change it.
Yeah, some people are like that, right?
He's like that. He's like that. I think.
And a couple other things I wanted to talk about here. Some of the other bands that you were in and stuff like that. One thing you even mentioned before, The Innocent.
Yes.
This is pretty interesting stuff because you play with Trent Reznor in this band.
Well, among others, yes.
Yeah, well, it's just he went on. We had some other people in here that have talked about Trent.
Yeah.
And how he's kind of like through, and this was obviously before 9 Inch Nails, all that kind of stuff. Anything unique about the guy? I mean, I'm sure you get asked that a lot, but I'm just curious. Is there anything unique about the guy at the time that you thought anything special about?
Well, he was serious, a serious guy. He was kind of fairly quiet about stuff. He was thinking. He was always thinking, though. Smart guy. And his dad was a fairly young, to me at the time. His father used to carry around a video camera. Now, this was when they still were larger. So MTV was, this was in the 80s, mid-80s. MTV was brand new, okay? And his father was videotaping him every gig. And Trent tended to play towards that camera. He had a keyboard on a swivel.
Oh.
So he'd face the band, and then he'd swivel it, kind of a...
Yeah, kind of neat. Kind of like, wow.
Not a huge thing, but it was
it was effective, right?
Cute. But he was always kind of aware, and it's like I didn't know or never thought about it until years later that he was being groomed. He was grooming himself, or his dad was helping him with that video thing, that new revolution that was going on. We didn't think twice about it, but his dad he's always working that camera.
Well, so Alan Greene and Trent Reznor, it just sounds like a very odd couple, and I'm wondering, like, what kind of music are you guys? What's? I mean, obviously,
I want to emphasize one thing about Trent. He played keyboards in the band. He wasn't like a central figure. He wasn't the Trent that he later became in terms of,
right.
He was kind of on the path of discovery, I guess. When we first found him, we were looking for a keyboard player, and we went to see this band. They were called The Urge, which he was a member of, and they were like a copy band. We went to Spanky's West or somewhere, or East, somewhere, or Painesville, to see him. We talked about him because we had just gotten a record deal with a new label in Chicago, out of Chicago, and it was there was all kinds of money behind it and impressive credentials potentially, right? And so there was we're going to do an album, and we, long story short, we let Trent know about this and that, and he says, yeah. So he ended up joining the band, but he just really was a keyboard guy, and the main forces in the band were Rodney Syka, our lead singer, who has been with Michael Stanley ever, in the last 30 years until Michael passed. He was in Breathless with me, and I've known him since the 70s. And then our keyboard player, Gary Jones, who, great writer, amazing musician, and he ended up being offered a job in Chicago, a house job for Red Label Records, this company. And he ended up moving there and working there, so we needed to get a keyboard player to replace Gary. And Trent became that guy.
I see.
So that was it. He was always quiet, and, me and Rodney were always silly and stupid and embarrassing him.
And he was a little younger, right? I mean,
yeah,
right.
For sure. But no, he had his sights on something. There was no question. He kind of knew where the bullshit lied.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When we would have a meeting in Chicago at the record company's office with this head guy who, I won't get into this, but the guy was, smooth talking, whatever. And Trent was noticeably itchy and not comfortable. Not that any of us were comfortable with certain things that were ideas that were being presented, But I think Trent kind of knew what was bullshit and what wasn't more than I did.
Yeah, he had an intuition, you would say.
He was a pretty shrewd guy.
Help guide him through some of this stuff.
He kind of identified things.
Yeah. Okay. Then I have Mr. Stress Band on here now. Was that soon after that, or was that
Yes.
So soon after that you formed that band? Oh, you didn't form it. You didn't form it. Right.
Mr. Stress Blues Band existed since the late 60s.
Right.
68.
Right. So you joined them.
In about 84 maybe.
And that was Mr. Stress Blues Band.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about them guys. What was that like? What was that time?
Well, Stress was a real character. He was a real, especially when he was young, he was a real devoted and really poured it out, the blues, the Chicago style. As he got older, as inevitably happens with so many of us, it kind of like some of that fire goes to a lower flame,
Yeah.
And so it's a constant battle to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, keep these people inspired.
Fact of life,
Yeah.
So he was the lead guy, piano player Mike Sands. The drummer was Nick Tranchito. Bass player was Raymond DeForest, a great bassist. It was just a real good band. And
this was like a pretty well received band also.
They were heroes in a certain area, a little pocket in Cleveland. There was the Mr. Stress Blues Band name carried weight in the local blues scene. It really did.
Yeah.
He was like an institution.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he was, especially around the University Circle area, Euclid Tavern, the old Euclid Tavern, the Brick Cottage. He was like an institution.
Yeah, right.
I get to go in and kind of in a heyday of the Uke. It was packed every week. We were a house band there, like every single week. Weekend.
And it was packed every time.
Oh my God!
How long did that go on for?
Well, let's see. The Euclid Tavern ended up getting sold somewhere during the late 80s, and that changed everything because the new owners they knew how to make the walls look nice and put a nice bathroom in and stuff, but they didn't know
how to have a live venue
about music business or a band, and they're a little hard to deal with. And I think it just kind of started going down, and it lost its whole thing, and the Stress Band started going through different personnel changes and evolved to different things, and there was a peak. Everything has a peak.
Sure, right.
So it was really rolling when I got to play with them. It was a lot of fun. It was a weekly gig that you always looked forward to.
Yeah, right.
You knew what was going to happen.
It's exciting when you're playing in front of that many people.
It's a blast. It's not small. It wasn't a big place.
That's why you do it.
Euclid Tavern was never a big place.
No.
but it was kind of a dive to tell you. Nobody's going to argue that, but it was certainly our kind of place.
There was definitely a vibe that came from that place.
God, yeah.
That was like a historic type place. You felt like
man,
you were
sure.
Yeah. And a couple other things we want to get into is the revival of Humble Pie. When they redid the whole thing, you were part of that also.
Well, Jerry Shirley, the original drummer, a lot of people know his name in Cleveland because they invited him on to WNCX, and things kind of took a dastardly turn towards the end. And
yeah, I think I remember what happened. Actually, that had to do with the food drive, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we don't want to get too much.
No,
into
but I
that,
remember it did have to do with the food drive.
Yeah, it did, and I know I could kind of identify what some of the things that could have happened, knowing Jerry as well as I did.
Yeah,
because I'd been working with him by that time, and but let's set that aside.
I got you.
Jerry was on tour with. This was after it was
Fastway.
Well, he was the drummer in Fastway also with Fast Eddie Clark from Motorhead, and co-wrote "Say What You Will," by the way, Jerry Shirley. Great Motorhead tune, great Fastway tune that Humble Pie used to do in the set. So, what was the question? Jerry Shirley was on tour with. It could have been Badfinger because some of his buddies, Joey Moland and so forth. I think he did a short stint filling in with those guys.
Wow,
they're old buddies. Wow. And so he coming through Cleveland, he met the woman he ended up marrying, and he located here. And suddenly, there's Jerry, the drummer, Humble Pie's drummer, is in town, and it's kind of a little buzz, at least in my circle of friends. So I kind of figured, well, I'm going to make my presence known and get to meet him and so forth. By then, like Butch and Frankie Starr and a lot of people who already know him got to meet him, and I went up and jammed with him on a jam thing at the old Sahara bar in Willoughby Hills, a real rockin' place. And we kind of were smiling. He's smiling at me, and I'm smiling at him, and I'm going back while I'm playing, and he's like, we're grinning at each other. And next thing I know, about a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call. I was living in Wycliffe at the time, which was close by there, but the phone rings, and I get a message on my answering machine, which we used to have. Hello, mate. This is Jerry Shirley. I was wondering, I got a gig in Pittsburgh. I was wondering if you'd be interested. Give me a call.
That's
okay.
Good.
Yeah. So I called him back. Well, yeah, sounds interesting. So I got the homework. I started listening to their stuff, concert stuff, Fillmore Live at the Phil, all this stuff. And then I got in touch with the lead singer, Charlie Hune, who's from Detroit. And Charlie Hune, the lead singer, who was filling the Steve Marriott position of the original Humble Pie. And Charlie Hune, a great rock singer, played with Ted Nugent for years and several albums with Nugent. So he had this big time rock ability and voice, and he knew how to fill that void, because Steve Marriott was not an easy void to fill, but he did a hell of a job, Charlie. So I got on the phone with him, and he gave me pointers. I took notes and about this song. We went through all the set lists that they're likely to be doing, and I'm going to be doing the solo on this song, and you're going to be doing the solo on this song, and then we're going to switch off on this song, and blah, blah, blah. We did a little homework on the phone. And I just spent concentrated for until that gig came up in a couple of weeks. So that when I went in, the first gig I did was at the Syrian Mosque in Pittsburgh, which was a kind of a happening concert venue, with Humble Pie. And I'd never played with him before. I met Charlie, our lead singer, and a bass player also from Detroit. Met them on stage. Yeah. when I got there in the back room, and I had done my homework, and they were real happy afterwards, and I had a good time, and that was it. I just spent the next 10 years doing every gig they had.
Wow! It just turned into a 10-year gig.
Got to go to Germany and everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Seattle to Florida to New Hampshire to
pretty wild stuff. We could probably do a podcast on that alone. Probably just all your experiences doing that. Probably
some of the experiences were great. Some of them were not great because, number one, there's one faction of people who were total fans of the band, love it, love their music, come hell or high water. And it doesn't matter if it's not all original members. If the band sounds, if it's really, it was not a lay down lounge version of Humble Pie. It was a kick-ass rockin' version.
Right.
So,
some people want that
some
purity.
people would love it, and they just treated you like kings that they thought you were. Perception is reality.
Right.
And other people who were real hardcore and knew that, Steve Merritt's not here. Peter Frampton's not in the band anymore. Yeah. Who are these guys?
Right. Even
though they're doing a hell of a good job, I'd like to think. You can't fault them. And some people held it, okay, that's not legitimate. So, and that's, I'm kind of like that myself with
Yeah, right.
So I understand that. But the band did really go out.
And, you guys did the best you could to fly the flag for Humble Pie, man.
It was a very powerful band. We had a good time, and some bad stories too.
Sure. You're gonna have good ones and bad ones when you got all that time and all the places you've been and all that stuff. You also recorded with Michael Stanley and Donnie Iris.
Yeah, but
just little stuff. I mean, like that. But that was stuff.
Not any like well-known things that they did, but in the studio with them, like a Donnie Iris thing before Donnie broke out with Aaliyah.
Yeah.
And I did a little recording, put some guitar on a single. With Michael, I played on one of his CDs, and I did some shows as Michael Stanley and Friends, for example. He did some shows back then on the harbor there, not the harbor, what do you call it, North Coast Harbor, where the Rock Hall is in that vicinity. Yeah. Previous to when they built it, and I was included on that, and I played. So yeah,
a little stuff, but that's interesting.
Not a major player in their worlds, but contributed a little and got to know them well and be part of their world for a little bit.
Now you say not a major player. Let me ask you a question. When you think about things like success, okay, so like when a musician is considered successful, or you hear that word get kind of thrown around a lot about artists in general. What is your definition of success? Like, what would you say that means? Let me real quick say this. A guy, for instance, who can make a living playing music, maybe he's not a millionaire, maybe he doesn't even do $100,000 a year, maybe he makes $50,000 a year and lives moderately, but he can do it based on just playing music alone. Did that guy make it, or do you have to be the millionaire?
The word success is totally subjective and misunderstood. Yes, I would say he's successful. It depends what your goals are, I suppose. It doesn't matter what somebody else sees.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I do.
Nobody's going to see the same.
Yeah, success shouldn't be based on somebody else's opinion. It's based on your own opinion.
Because you know what they say about opinions.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So it really varies, and it's a sliding scale. There's people I know are successful, but other people don't know who they are, maybe.
Right.
And then I'll make it this real quick, but talk about Michael Stanley. One of the great quandaries by a lot of people. Oh, how come Michael didn't become famous elsewhere? How come he wasn't successful elsewhere? Well, I say, you know what? That is total bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. Michael was hugely successful. I mean, the guy set attendance records at Blossom and the Coliseum, and had a TV career and had a radio career and has legions of fans.
Legions.
And beyond the norm. It doesn't matter. And he had pockets of markets in the country who were hip to him and stuff like that. Albums on major labels, and don't tell me he's not successful.
Oh yeah,
lived a good life. God bless him. And he was a great guy.
Well, I think the problem is that for whatever reason he gets compared to Bruce Springsteen's success.
I think I don't want to get too much into
no, I don't either. But I think that's
those
what
guys.
Happens.
Except I think he created that inevitable comparison only because he fashioned his band and his desires after that kind of sort of thing.
Yeah.
The Springsteen Seeger thing, the big, large bands with the sax, and try to emulate that. Yeah. And it's hard to emulate that.
Yeah.
It's hard to take the Beatles and want to be like the Beatles and become the Beatles or as popular.
Unless you're the Beatles, right?
And there's a billion arguments. We won't get into that.
I got you.
But he was a great guy,
and he was successful.
He was totally successful. Don't listen to anybody because they don't know what they're talking about.
One thing I did notice when I was going through the research about you and stuff that I found to be extremely fascinating, and I definitely want to hear the story about this, is you wrote a song or co-wrote a song with Carlos Santana.
He didn't write the song at all. Carlos didn't write the song. He did
so,
the song. He recorded the song.
And who wrote it? You?
I co-wrote it with Mark Avsek.
Oh.
Mark Avsek was also in Breathless with me. He later went on to become Donnie Iris's main creative force. He produced and wrote their material, Aliyah, and all that stuff, right after Breathless. And he and he got together with me. He wanted to do a kind of a bluesy thing on my behalf. I thought it was wonderful of him. And let's just co-write some stuff. And I said, well, Mark, I'm not a great writer. You know, I'm like a team guy. I could collaborate pretty good. But, well, no, come on, let's do it. And so we got together and wrote 10 whatever songs. And he encouraged me to write lyrics and stuff, or try. And I knew damn well I couldn't write lyrics. Not being a vocalist and concentrating as a guitarist, an instrumentalist all my life, I didn't really have a good firm grasp and poetic inclination towards lyrics.
It's a different art form.
Yeah, and there's, so he just encouraged me nonetheless. So I wrote what were pretty elementary, maybe embarrassing or not, vocal lyrics and whatnot. So we did these tunes. We wrote a song called, I forget what the original title was. It wasn't Angel Love at the time, which is the name of the song that Carlos...
Angel of Love, you said?
Angel Love.
Angel Love.
Angel Love, Come For Me, in parentheses. So we'd done the song. It was a cool thing. We got done, and, a year later, nothing is obviously going on with this tape that we have. And a fellow named Mason Ruffner, Texas guitar player, writer, well known in certain writing circles. He knew people like Carlos Santana, Ringo Starr, Bob Dylan knew of him. In fact, he actually played on a Bob Dylan album.
Wow.
Nobody knows who the guy is, even though he had an album on CBS and he had a video on MTV with a couple of our ex-Breathless guys as his band, and got a deal on CBS. So he was close to Mark, who had worked with him in that band. So Mark played Mason Ruffner this song that we'd recorded, and Mason really liked it a lot. He says to Mark, would you mind if I changed the lyrics on this song and kind of put in my own lyrics and kept everything else like as is? And yeah, why not? What are we else doing? Nothing's going on with it. Let's just do, sure, Mason Ruffner. So he did it, and lo and behold, long story short, he got into the hands of Carlos Santana, who liked the song a lot, so writing credits were me, Mark, and then later Mason got added as the lyrics. Most of the music was, I was going to say, the guitar hook and stuff like that. It was my idea, I guess. Yeah, take that.
So it turns out you can write, right? You just because in the beginning you were like, well, I told him I'm not the best.
I collaborated on the instrumental part. I wrote the bulk of the original part, but I didn't write the lyrics.
No, but that doesn't mean that much. I mean, that's the guitar part just as important as those damn
lyrics.
lyrics.
I got to meet Santana
especially him.
Well, I got to meet him at Blossom backstage as a result of that, and he goes, "Did you write that? Did you write that guitar lick?" I said, "Yeah." I love it. I said, "Oh."
Yeah, that was like. Yeah,
so anyway, here's what's really the kick-ass. No, that's the wrong word. It's the opposite of kick-ass. It's a goofy story. He released the biggest album of his entire career, set the world on fire with Supernatural, Carlos Santana. He got 8 Grammys. Everybody, the album of the year, everybody, Smooth with Rob Thomas with a big hit off of it. They're all duets, tracks were different people with Santana. And it sold gazillions of albums, multi-platinum. Biggest recording of his career. And then, me and Mark would always go, it'd be so cool if he'd ever recorded that one. Because I remember Mark saying, he's doing it live. We've been told that he's doing it during his shows. But no kidding. So we got to see him at Blossom. My wife and I went to Blossom, and he was playing there. Jeff Beck opened up, and Santana, and we're sitting there in the pavilion, and all of a sudden I'm hearing this. I go, there it is, and they're doing it. So
how cool!
What a rush, right? So I got backstage and talked to him later, and blah blah blah. So he sold all these supernaturals like, next thing you know, 10 years later, Supernatural Legacy Edition gets released, which is the 10th anniversary of Supernatural, with a second disc added, new remixes, added bonus tracks, things that weren't released or whatnot, you know. And you got people like Clapton on there doing jam, all these big names. And our single was released as our song was released as the first single on the Legacy Edition Supernatural 10 years later, 2010.
Wow.
And it didn't really do too much anymore because everybody who was going to buy that album certainly bought it.
Already the first time.
Already.
Yeah.
So, like, in comparison, it's a drop in the bucket. But
so I see what you're saying.
It was like, if I sold that many, the second release thing, it would be pretty impressive.
Yeah, right.
But for him in scale,
especially after what the first one already had done.
So yeah, so it really didn't. But there's my name, and there I am on that album.
So real quick question about that before. So you're in the concert and the song comes on. Did you at all ever feel compelled to look at the guy next to you and go, "Yeah, I wrote that song"?
No, I just said it. No. No,
I would be like, I wrote it just to fuck with them. If anything else, like no one would believe you anyways. Who believes the guy next to them wrote the song that they're currently listening to?
It's one of those funny things.
It is. It's cool. All right. So then I want to get into kind of more up to date now because now you have your band.
Yes, sir.
And like I said, I went and saw them last week. Killer band. Just amazing. Just absolutely amazing. And I want to announce the guys to, talk about them a little bit too, because they're all four of you are all great. I could watch you. I could watch anyone at any time.
That's great.
And I'm fine. So I want to start with your lead singer, Tom Odegaard, Odie. And he plays vocals and harmonica, and he's pretty much equally as good on both of those instruments.
He's a real treasure. Yeah.
He's unbelievable. He's just incredible.
I think he's got one of the best blues kind of voice, natural, unaffected, wonderful natural voice.
Pitch perfect type
thing. It's
thing.
warm. It's on. He's so proud of his singing, just as
he's great.
It's like what I try to do on guitar in terms of standard, keeping my own personal standards. Try to keep it up. He's the same exact way.
And both you guys seem like you do your instruments effortless. Like his vocal singing, it seems effortless to him, and your guitar playing, it looks effortless to you. Like you guys are just that good that you don't even really have to try anymore.
Well,
sometimes you make it look good. You know what I mean? Thanks. It's true. And this is the Alan Greene band. So they can come out and see you, and you play locally. I saw you at the Union House. You're playing.
That's pretty much all we do.
Yeah, is that really the Union House is your main?
No. I mean,
you
local.
Just played smaller venues.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I loved. I was like literally, how far away? I was only like 5 feet from you, or 10 feet maybe from you.
Local.
That's the best.
Now we had experiences of opening up concert shows for people, maybe at the Kent Stage or maybe the Beachland or somewhere or another. Opened up at the Allen Theater for the James Gang reunion back in 2002 or something like that when I first started the band. And but no, we have no pretenses. Is that the right word? We're just a local band, small time thing, and it's honest. There's no.
I honestly was sitting there thinking to myself, I could sit here and it's free. There was no cover charge. I went in there, I sat down, I ate, I had a few beers, and I'm thinking, am I going to go pay $100 to go see some national act and sit 10 miles from the stage, and will I have nearly this much fun? And I came to the conclusion, no. I was like, this right here is more fun than that. And I really started to think about that, and I'm like, how many other people are thinking this way? Like, has anyone really discovered the fact that there's all this unbelievable stuff to go watch in our backyard?
Right.
And they're not charging you hardly anything to do this stuff. You could go there and do it, and it's like,
well, somebody's got to have local. You got to have local bands.
Yeah, man. But
Cleveland has a good rep. I mean, you travel around. If you take Cleveland music for granted, travel the country, stop in some clubs. Not counting concerts, you're not going to see what you see in Cleveland, or you're not going to hear what you hear in Cleveland. And it's second nature to Clevelanders, taken for granted. But in my entire memory, as long as I could think, the qualities of Cleveland musicians, the caliber, is far beyond what you see in a majority of other cities. Yeah. It's not not counting New York City or L.A. or something.
Or Nashville.
About the country.
Right.
There's always been a really incredible caliber
Scene.
of musicianship in Cleveland.
There is. Drummer, Rob Luoma. Awesome drummer. Another guy, man, I was just like this enamored
No nonsense. No nonsense. My favorite thing about
precision.
Favorite thing about my current band is that nobody's a hot dog, nobody's an ego crazy person. It's just like just real laid back and try to have a good time. They're the great natured guys.
You guys have fun with each other too, for sure. I can tell you guys. You have fun with each other up there.
Yeah,
you guys are cutting it up, having a good time. Seems like you can do it a million times and every night's a little different. It's new something. Bass player, and he does backup vocals for you also. That's Justin Butcher. Awesome.
These guys are so underrated because they don't, put themselves in the spotlight too often. They're kind of content to be.
They serve the song. They serve the song perfectly. That's what they're for there.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's what. Yeah. That to me, I think that's like the best. The best musicians do that.
Well, that's what my preference is.
Yeah. Right.
I don't want everybody hot dogging all night long. It's not what I ever wanted. So it's really cool.
It's not for everybody. Solos and constant all that. It's not for everybody. I mean, like
it gets old.
Yeah, I mean it can, and it can take away from some of the greater things you do if you're just constantly doing that stuff and constantly trying to be flashy and stuff. Then when you are maybe do a little something flashy once in a while, that really stands out. Now, it's like wow, you get people's attention. If you're always doing it,
hopefully, yeah, right. But they were lovely people.
Yeah,
they're great guys, great friends.
It's killer, man.
Great professionalism, standards of, on time and nothing, getting screwed up and shit. None of that.
Just killer, man.
Yeah, just low key, humble little band. No pretensions going on or pretenses.
No, man.
There's that word again.
But really, you guys really pull it off every song.
Thanks.
I'm telling you, it was great. I loved it. I'll go see you guys anytime. And I want to get into the fact that just recently, this year, in fact, you were inducted into the Cleveland Blues Society Hall of Fame. It's got to be a big deal. It's a big deal. Any Hall of Fame is a big deal, but this is a pretty big deal. I mean, we just got done saying that Cleveland has a different level of musician than most all the other cities in the United States, and in this city, these musicians, you're in the Hall of Fame. Now that I don't care what.
Well, there's a lot of people who, if you're not in the blues or the blues realm, you're not going to know.
Well,
it's like it's like you're talking about earlier, the scenario of success, and I said it was subjective. It's a sliding thing. It depends. In a certain pond, in the local blues pond, it's a wonderful thing, and I'm real proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. That's what I'm saying. You ought to be real proud of it.
I am. I don't know why or how. I think,
it's hard work, man, and it's
I think I like to say that's just the way I feel is you get older and they want to give you a little tap on the shoulder before you croak.
I don't know about that. I go there to see you last week, and that's really the first time I really seen you, like especially like the way I was right in front of you the whole entire time, and the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, there's nothing about anything I saw where I doubted any kind of accolades that you've been given. I mean, everything I watched and everything I said, I felt like I was in front of like a legend type of a musician who was just doing things that, I mean, you're not a standard guitar player. I don't go to anywhere at any bar at any time and see a guy of your caliber up there doing what you're doing. You just don't. And it was.
You get fooled easily.
A lot of fun, man. I had a lot of fun, dude. You're great, man. I like your humility, but you can't fool me. You're a great guy, man. And I got to meet you that night, and I found out you were a great guy also, which to me that's great because I knew I was gonna have a podcast with you, and I'm like, I hope he's a cool guy. Thanks. And thank God you were, man. Thank God you were. Honestly, man, I have a lot of fun. I'm glad I met you.
Well, vice versa.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to meet you.
You got a real good thing going here. It's very nice, very professionally done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I got me and Pat doing it, and with we seem to do well together when we do stuff like things.
Yeah, everybody has to spread the word.
Yeah, man. Yes.
Cleveland.
level up Cleveland. We got to get the word. A little more word would be helpful.
Well.
A little more word, but I got a feeling this episode will do just fine. It'll do really well.
So you got the passion for what you do, just like you're talking about musicians and stuff, and who maybe gets a little further ahead than others, or makes people take note of them. It's that kind of passion.
Yeah, man.
Passion for what you do is what, and if you don't lose it, you're in good shape.
I hope
you've got it for what you do, so it's beautiful.
I appreciate that a lot, man. Seriously, I appreciate that. Coming from you, that means a lot. All right, we're out of time. We're going to have you back down. You're going to be one of them guys we're going to have to put on again because, there's a couple of you guys. I felt like when we were done, I was like, man, I feel like there's like another hour or two to talk about this stuff, but we got to cut it. We got to cut it at some point.
At some point, that's right.
Yeah, so you guys, play out, and you guys are doing, one thing I was talking about, there's a guy named Jim Moses, I think is his name, and he puts out a thing every week where it shows all the cover bands where they're going to be playing, West Side, East Side, South, North, Downtown, da-da-da-da, and you're always in there if you guys are playing out. He's always got you on there, yeah.
We're not a cover band.
Well, no, but you guys are in there because you play where the cover bands play. So like the Union House, they have a lot of cover bands in there. Right. So Union House's gigs are in there. So you got put into the Union House. So it's not necessarily just the cover bands. It's the venues that play most of the cover bands that are already in his thing. So all the bands go there. But that's where I find out about it.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, I've scaled back the amount of gigs that I'm booking. I used to fill up the calendar for the sake of filling up the calendar. And then during the COVID break in 2020, I got some perspective because nobody was playing, and and I'm starting to get older and physically the limit.
If you're still playing, if you're still out there doing it, I mean, just not constant.
No, I'm not saying it's more fun now without playing all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and not just try to fill out the calendar, but
we got a bass in the background.
Wow.
This is all bands in this building, so this is what it is.
All right. So anyway, it's great fun to be playing,
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for us, man.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks for coming down again. I appreciate it. Keep your eye open for the Alan Greene Band. They're playing at a bar near you sometime soon, I'm sure. And we will see you guys next week. Peace out.
That'll be fine.